Move those shaking hands away from the counter, Grandma. People like you don't walk out with that kind of money. Officer Brent Maddox didn't even bother pretending the words weren't meant to sting. His voice carried across the lobby, loud enough for every customer in Stonebridge National Bank to stop mid-sentence. He snatched the elderly woman's ID from her fingers like he was picking up trash off the sidewalk. Her name was Evelyn Bird, 73 years old, 5 feet tall in her best Sunday shoes, and holding onto her cane like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Maddox leaned in close, lips curling. You should have kept your little monthly check and minded your business instead of acting like you've got $4,000 lying around. He shoved her shoulder lightly, not enough to send her falling, but enough to make the message clear. Humiliation? Dominance? Power. The kind he enjoyed. A small gasp rippled from the line behind her. A young mother clutched her toddler closer. A businessman glanced around nervously, pretending he didn't see what everyone saw. Evelyn didn't lift her head. Her eyes stayed fixed on the pavement outside the glass doors, because she knew who stood out there. A row of heavy leather boots planted firmly on the sidewalk, black denim, thick beards, full-face helmets resting on handlebars. The unmistakable red and white patch spread across their vests. Hell's Angels, Los Diablos chapter. And every one of them was staring into the bank, straight at her. Not at the officer, not at the other customers, her. Because she wasn't just some old woman. She was something the officer hadn't figured out yet. Someone they cared about. Someone the Angels never let be touched. But Officer Maddox didn't know that. Not yet. He was too busy puffing his chest like the big man in the room. Before we go any further, the narrator might have said, comment where you're watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story, you do not want to miss that one. But inside the bank, the story was only just beginning. Earlier that morning, the sun had barely warmed the cracked bus stop bench when Evelyn Bird stepped off the number 18 route, steadying herself with her cane. Her bones had been loud that morning, the kind of ache that makes you talk to your own joints just to convince them to behave. Come on now, she whispered to her knees. We got important business today. She clutched a simple manila folder to her chest, something delicate inside, something she checked at least a dozen times before leaving the house. Her granddaughter's college housing deposit. 2 years of saving $5 here, $10 there. 3 winters of turning the heater down to barely warm. But the deadline was Monday. And her granddaughter? Well, she'd worked her whole life for a chance to get out of the cycle everyone expected her to stay in. Evelyn wasn't going to let anything stop that dream. Almost there, baby, she murmured as she shuffled toward the bank doors. The glass slid open automatically, welcoming her into the chilled air conditioning that felt far too fancy for her thrift store sweater. Friday mornings at Stonebridge were always busy. A cluster of customers waited in line, tapping their feet, glancing at their watches. Evelyn smiled politely as she took her place at the end of the line. She never liked making a fuss, never liked being the center of attention, and she certainly never expected the morning to turn into a scene. Next, please. Called a young teller with a sharp haircut and a too-clean shirt. His name tag read Kyle Benton, but the way he nervously straightened his tie made him look younger, like someone pretending to be confident in a job that still scared him. Evelyn stepped forward. "Good morning," she said softly. Kyle didn't smile back. His eyes flicked toward the office where the bank manager sat behind a glass wall, then back to her. "What can I do for you today, ma'am?" "I'd like to withdraw some funds." She placed her folder carefully on the counter. $4,000. Kyle blinked. "Cash?" "Yes, dear." "That's a lot to withdraw at once. Are you sure?" "Oh, I'm sure." She nodded gently. "My granddaughter's housing payment is due. They don't take checks." Kyle hesitated. Then his voice shifted. Not rude, just tense. "I'll need to see your identification." "Of course, sweetheart." Her fingers trembled as she opened her purse. She hated when they did that. Her arthritis always acted up when she needed to be precise. She shuffled through tissues, medication bottles, a peppermint or two, until she found her wallet. "Sorry, these old hands don't move like they used to." "It's fine."
Kyle said, but the stiffness in his jaw said he was losing patience. Finally, she slid her ID and debit card across the counter. Kyle typed her information into the computer, brows knitting tighter with every line he read. Then he swallowed and glanced toward the manager's office again. "One moment, please," he said abruptly. "I need to verify something." He walked fast toward the glass office. Evelyn watched through the window as Kyle leaned down to whisper to manager Frank Dillard, a tall man with the confident arrogance of someone who'd never had to worry about money in his life. Dillard looked up, looked straight at Evelyn. His expression shifted from boredom to suspicion to something uglier. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. She'd seen that look before. She knew exactly what was coming. When Kyle returned, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood Officer Brent Maddox. Bulky vest, shaved jawline, mirrored sunglasses pushed up onto his head like a crown. "Ma'am," he said loudly, "I need you to step back from the counter." The whole lobby turned. Evelyn stiffened. "Is something wrong?" "Don't play innocent. You're not fooling anybody. Folks like you don't just come walking in asking for thousands of dollars." He blinked in disbelief. "I've had my account here for—" "I said step back." He grabbed her elbow, too hard, and jerked her a half step away. Her cane wobbled. Her knees buckled. The folder almost slipped from her arms. "Please," she gasped. But Maddox wasn't listening. He held her ID between two gloved fingers like it was contaminated. "Trying to pull a fast one, huh? Trying to scam the bank?" "I'm not—" "Save it." He turned to Kyle. "Is this who you called about?" Kyle swallowed, nodding nervously. Evelyn's cheeks burned. People were staring. Someone whispered, "Is she trying to steal something?" Her heart pounded painfully against her ribs. "No," she pleaded. Softly. No, please. I didn't do anything wrong." Maddox leaned close, his voice venomous. "You're under investigation for attempted fraud, and you're coming with me." He jerked her wrist again. This time, something outside shifted. A heavy shadow passed the window, then another, then another. Boots, leather, patches. One by one, the Hell's Angels on the sidewalk turned fully toward the glass doors, watching, following Maddox's every move. Eyes sharp, bodies still, silent like wolves. But Maddox was too wrapped up in his own ego to notice. He pushed Evelyn toward the entrance, barking something about "people like you." And Evelyn, terrified, whispered under her breath, "Oh Lord, they're not going to let this go." Because what the officer truly didn't understand was that he wasn't the one in control of this moment. Not anymore.
Officer Brent Maddox's grip tightened around Evelyn Bird's thin wrist as he dragged her toward the glass doors. Her cane clattered awkwardly against the tile floor, barely keeping pace with his long strides. She tried to steady herself, but his hand jerked harder with each step, like she was an inconvenience he couldn't wait to be rid of. "Come on," he growled. "We're not wasting any more time on your little act." "My act?" Evelyn whispered, breath trembling. "Sir, please." "Save it," he snapped, waving her forward with an irritated flick. "You think I don't know your type? Fake accounts, overdraft schemes, sob stories. You people always pretend it's a misunderstanding." "I'm not pretending," she said, voice cracking. "My granddaughter." "Oh, I'm sure," he mocked. "There's always a granddaughter." Gasps and murmurs rippled behind them. A woman whispered, "Why is he talking to her like that?" Another said, "That poor lady." But no one stepped forward. No one said anything louder. Evelyn wasn't surprised. She'd lived long enough to know that most people hated conflict more than injustice. Her hands shook as she clung to her folder, her granddaughter's future, her dream, slipping further from reach with every step she took. As the officer pushed open the glass doors, sunlight spilled into the bank lobby, along with the sound of rumbling engines parked along the street. Maddox didn't even flinch, but Evelyn saw the danger immediately. The motorcycles weren't just parked, they were positioned, lined up with intention,
steel gleaming, chrome polished enough to burn the eyes. Their riders stood around them like a fortress made of leather and muscle. The kind of men people crossed the street to avoid. The kind of men who didn't watch quietly unless they were deciding something. The Hell's Angels, and not the clean-cut TV version people joked about. These were the real ones, the Los Diablos chapter, notorious even among bikers. Evelyn recognized the one in front instantly, even through his helmet and vest. Red Jack Turner, her late husband's godson, 6'4", arms covered in ink, eyes that could freeze a man solid. And he wasn't alone. Half a dozen members stood behind him, forming a wall of controlled menace, their helmets resting on handlebars, their vests open, their expressions unreadable but laser-focused. On her. On Maddox. On the way he manhandled her like she was trash. Maddox didn't seem to notice the sudden tension in the air, but everyone else did. A man walking his dog hurried across the street. 2 teenagers on skateboards turned around instantly. A woman at the bus stop ducked behind her newspaper. Even the bank customers who had stepped outside froze in place. Because the angels weren't smiling. They weren't talking. They weren't moving. They were waiting. Evelyn's heart dropped. "Oh no," she murmured, voice too soft for anyone but herself. Maddox stopped half a step from the curb, tugging her arm again. "You hearing voices now, Grandma? I said move!" She didn't dare look up, didn't dare meet Red Jack's eyes, because she knew exactly what he was capable of when someone he cared about was hurt. And while she appreciated loyalty, there were lines even loyalty shouldn't cross. "Sir, please let me speak." "No more talking," he barked. Her cane wobbled again. Pain shot up her spine as her wrist twisted under his grip. She stumbled, catching herself at the last second. That stumble, that tiny, involuntary motion, was enough. Enough for Red Jack to take one slow, deliberate step forward. Boot hitting pavement like a warning shot. Maddox looked up. Finally. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath. He saw them now, the wall of leather vests, tattooed forearms, silent fury. But instead of backing off, he puffed his chest out. "Ma'am, do you know these people?" I know some of them," she whispered. Maddox scoffed. "Yeah, I bet you do." Red Jack's jaw twitched. It was the smallest movement, but every angel behind him noticed. They straightened subtly. A shift like wolves lifting their heads at the scent of blood. "Hey," Maddox snapped, waving his free hand toward them. "Keep moving, fellas. This ain't your business." A sound rose from one biker, not quite a laugh, but close. More like disbelief wrapped in annoyance. Red Jack didn't move, didn't blink. His eyes locked on Evelyn's bruised wrist, then on the officer's hand, still gripping her, then back to her. For the first time he spoke, and his voice was low enough to vibrate the air. "Let her go." 3 words. Quiet, measured, deadly. Maddox barked out a laugh. "You think I'm scared of a bunch of retirees in leather jackets?" A few customers audibly inhaled. Wrong move. Wrong move. Very, very wrong move. Red Jack took another step, the sunlight catching the red and white patch stitched across his chest. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't bluffing, he wasn't even angry. Just cold, like a man who's already decided what happens next. "Officer," he said slowly, "you got 3 seconds to take your hands off Miss Bird before things go real bad for you." Evelyn's pulse thudded painfully. "No," she whispered urgently. "Jack, please don't." He lifted one hand, just slightly, silencing her. "Miss Evelyn," he said softly, eyes still locked on Maddox, "you taught me better than to let folks manhandle our elders. You really think I'm gonna stand here and do nothing?" Maddox squared his shoulders. "We're talking about a fraud suspect." "She's not a suspect," Red Jack cut in. "She's family." A low rumble spread through the group behind him. Agreement, solidarity, a warning that stretched across the parking lot. Maddox tightened his grip on Evelyn reflexively, her face pinched in pain. Red Jack saw it. Everyone saw it. One more second, one more ounce of pressure, and this would explode. Evelyn felt her breath catch. "Please," she whispered, voice shaking, but no one heard her. Not the officer drunk on authority, not the biker simmering with loyalty, not the crowd watching with morbid curiosity. She felt the moment tipping, like a teacup on the edge of a table, one nudge away from shattering. Then Maddox, careless, arrogant, made the worst mistake of his morning. Maybe of his life. He shoved her. Not hard, just enough to get her out of the way. But for someone her age, someone with fragile bones and a bad hip, the world tilted. The sidewalk rushed toward her. Her cane wobbled. Her hand slipped. Her folder opened, scholarship papers scattering across the pavement like dying butterflies, and Evelyn Bird, the woman who had survived cancer, grief, poverty, racism, and a lifetime of keeping her dignity intact, fell. The gasp from the Hells Angels hit like a gunshot. Red Jack's head snapped up. His jaw clenched, and everything, absolutely everything, changed.
When the bank doors slammed shut behind Evelyn Bird, the world outside felt sharper, louder, and far more dangerous than it had 10 minutes earlier. The police cruiser was still parked crooked across two handicap spaces, lights flashing even though there was no emergency, just ego. Officer Brent Maddox strutted ahead of her like he'd solved a murder, not harassed an elderly woman trying to withdraw her own money. He yanked the door open and jerked his thumb toward the back seat. "Get in." Evelyn hesitated. Her knees hurt. Her fingers were trembling. Her throat was so tight she could barely breathe. I haven't done anything," she whispered. Maddox shot her a smirk. "That's what everybody says before the cuffs go on." A couple across the street paused mid-conversation. A passing jogger slowed down. People always slowed down when they sensed injustice, right until the moment they convinced themselves it wasn't their business and walked away. But behind them, leaning against their bikes like a row of iron statues, the Hells Angels weren't walking away. Axel, Bear, and Rooster stood shoulder to shoulder in their leather cuts, arms crossed, jaws grinding. They weren't talking, they weren't moving, just watching. And Maddox, too proud to notice anything outside his own shadow, hadn't yet realized the mistake he was making. Evelyn's hands clutched the edge of the cruiser door as she tried to lower herself inside. Her hip screamed, her fingers slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the concrete. Maddox didn't help her. He only rolled his eyes, muttering, "My tax dollars at work." A large tattooed hand reached down and picked up her cane before she could grab it. Maddox looked over, annoyed, then stopped. Rooster stood there, 6'4" with a red beard thick enough to hide secrets in. "Ma'am, you dropped this," he said in a low rumble. He didn't hand it to Maddox. He held it out to Evelyn like she was royalty. Her voice shook. "Thank you, young man." Rooster gave a single nod, a respectful one, the kind men gave their mothers, not strangers. Maddox scoffed. "Beat it! This doesn't involve you." Rooster's eyes shifted, slow and dangerous, toward the officer. "Sure it does," he said softly. "We were standing right here. We saw everything." Axel cracked his knuckles without breaking eye contact. Bear folded his arms, tattoos bulging like moving terrain, and something in Maddox's chest tightened, not enough to admit fear, just enough to feel it. He slammed the cruiser door shut. "Lady, you're being detained for attempted fraud." Evelyn pressed her palms to the seat. Her heart thumped like it was trying to escape her ribs. "Fraud? I've been banking here for 20 years. "Save it. You think you're the first one who strolls in off a bus waving an ID and asking for thousands in cash? We've seen scams like yours all month." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "My granddaughter needs her college housing." "Yeah, and I need a vacation. Doesn't mean I walk into the bank demanding money I don't have." It felt like her world was cracking open. She had worked at that hospital cafeteria for 33 years, saving dollars in an envelope one shift at a time, and now this stranger with a badge was calling her a thief. Inside the bank, Ryan Keller watched from the window, frozen with guilt. He hadn't meant for this to escalate. He thought the manager would just verify the account. He didn't expect police. He didn't expect handcuffs. He didn't expect the world outside to be on fire. His manager, Frank Dillard, closed the blinds. "Let the police handle it." But she's never overdrafted. Her account's good. Ryan swallowed hard. I checked twice. Frank didn't even look up, and I said, let it go. The blinds snapped shut, sealing Evelyn out like she was something embarrassing. Back outside, Maddox radioed something into his shoulder mic. His words were sharp, clipped, trying to sound official, not insecure. Evelyn closed her eyes. She felt small, embarrassed, helpless, and then a familiar voice rose behind the officer. That's enough. Bear stepped forward, boots grinding gravel. His patch glinted in the sunlight, the one that meant something even police didn't like to cross. Maddox turned to face him, jaw tight. Step away from the cruiser, Bear said. This is police business. Bear shook his head slowly. Doesn't look like it. Looks like harassment. Looks like discrimination. Looks like a man in a uniform flexing because he thinks nobody's gonna call him out. Maddox's face reddened. Are you threatening an officer? No, Bear said. I'm telling you we're witnesses. Rooster pulled out his phone and held it up. Recording, not aggressively, just enough to make Maddox sweat. Axel took out his own. Got your badge number already. Keep going. Evelyn's eyes widened. She didn't understand the politics of biker clubs. She didn't know who these men really were, but she knew one thing. They were the only ones standing up for her. Maddox glared at them. Y'all think filming me's gonna do something? Rooster shrugged. Yup. Evelyn's heart thudded as Maddox grabbed her arm, pulling her deeper into the back seat. And then the revelation came. A shaky voice called from across the parking lot. Grandma? A young woman in college sweats ran toward them, backpack bouncing, panic written across her face. Naomi Bird, Evelyn's granddaughter, skidded to a stop beside the cruiser. What's happening? Grandma, what did they do to you? Why are you in a police car? Evelyn's throat tightened with relief and shame all at once. Maddox pointed at Naomi. Step back, this is an active detainment. Naomi ignored him. She can't even walk without her cane. Why is she in there? She attempted to withdraw funds that don't belong to her. They do belong to her, Naomi shouted back. She worked half her life for that account. I helped her check the balance last night. Maddox blinked. For the first time, something like doubt flickered. Rooster held up his phone. Hear that, officer? Family member confirms, and we've got it on video. Naomi rounded on Maddox, fiery now. You didn't even check the balance, did you? Maddox stiffened. His silence was his answer. Inside the cruiser, Evelyn felt tears burning her eyes, not from fear this time, but from something she hadn't felt in years. Someone was finally fighting for her. And then Naomi pulled out her own phone. I'm calling my uncle. He's on the city council. Maddox paled. The Hells Angels exchanged looks. Naomi wasn't bluffing, and that was the truth. The full weight of it hit the officer, harder than any fist ever could. He'd messed with the wrong grandmother, and he wasn't the only one about to pay for it.
Naomi's phone was still pressed to her ear when Officer Maddox slammed his palm down on the cruiser roof hard enough to echo across the parking lot. That's enough, he barked, trying to reel back control he no longer had. Everyone back up. This is police business. No one moved. Not Naomi, who stood like a coiled spring ready to launch. Not the customers who had quietly drifted out of the bank. And definitely not the Hells Angels, who now formed a semicircle around the cruiser, silent, immovable, and deeply unimpressed. Bear stepped forward again, a mountain wrapped in leather. Officer, you got about 15 seconds to start explaining why this lady is in cuffs, because from what we saw, she was just trying to get her own money. Maddox's jaw twitched. I don't owe any of you an explanation. Axel grinned, all teeth and trouble. That's where you're wrong, hero. When you drag a 76-year-old woman out of a bank for daring to exist, you owe this whole damn town an explanation. Rooster angled his phone, getting Maddox's face, the cruiser, Evelyn's terrified eyes in one clean shot. Keep talking. America's gonna love this. Maddox's eyes darted between them. His heartbeat thudded in his ears. He wasn't afraid. Not yet. But he was off balance, and he knew it. He hadn't expected an audience. He definitely hadn't expected an audience with cameras, political connections, and leather cuts that even cops didn't provoke lightly. Naomi moved to the cruiser door. Grandma, are you okay? Did he hurt you? Evelyn tried to steady her voice. I'm all right, baby. Just scared. That single word, scared, hit Naomi like a slap. She turned slowly toward Maddox, her voice low and shaking with rage. You put your hands on her? I touched her arm, that's it. And unless you want obstruction charges... Bear laughed, a deep, mocking rumble that killed the rest of Maddox's sentence. You're not putting charges on anybody. You're barely keeping yourself from drowning right now. A voice cut through the tension like a blade. What in God's name is happening out here? Ryan Keller burst through the bank doors, red-faced, sweat beading at his temples. He looked at Evelyn in the cruiser, then at Maddox, then at the crowd filming. His stomach dropped. This isn't, he stuttered. Frank Dillard, the bank manager, followed behind him, adjusting his tie like he was stepping out for a press conference. He saw the Hells Angels, saw the phones, saw Naomi's fury, and instantly wished he'd called in sick. Maddox gestured toward the manager. This man reported suspicious activity. Frank froze. Every eye was on him. Ryan swallowed hard. Sir, that's not exactly what happened. Frank shot him a warning glare. Keller, not now. But Ryan's guilt was too big, too loud, too obvious. She just wanted a withdrawal. Her account is valid. There's no fraud. Naomi whipped toward Frank. You called the police on my grandmother because she asked for her own money? Frank raised his chin, trying to reclaim authority he'd already lost. Her behavior was erratic. She couldn't locate her ID. She appeared confused. She has arthritis, not dementia. Evelyn closed her eyes. She hated this, being talked about like she wasn't standing 10 feet away. Rooster stepped closer to the manager. So, you saw a black woman struggling to open her purse and decided that made her a criminal? Frank's lips went thin. Don't twist my words. But the crowd murmured. People knew exactly what they'd seen inside the bank. Some had turned away, some had pretended not to notice, but all of them had seen the discomfort on Frank's face the moment he looked at Evelyn. Axel rubbed a hand over his beard. Sounds like discrimination. Frank's voice grew sharp. It was protocol. Funny, Rooster said. Raising his phone, I've never seen protocol apply to old white folks pulling out a handful of coupons and taking 10 minutes to find their reading glasses. A ripple of agreement moved through the onlookers. Maddox glared at Ryan. You told us there was a fraud attempt. No, I said the manager wanted to verify the account. I didn't say call the police. I didn't say arrest anyone. The truth landed like a brick. Everyone turned to Frank. Frank adjusted his tie. His tells were getting obvious. Officer, this is a misunderstanding. Release her. We'll handle it internally. Now you want to release her? Naomi shouted. After dragging her out in front of everyone? Frank hesitated. He wasn't used to losing control. We'll offer a formal apology. Bear's eyebrows shot up. A formal apology? He walked right up to Frank until they were nearly chest to chest. Buddy, she doesn't need an apology. She needs justice. Maddox slammed the cruiser door again. Back off! Bear didn't move. Make me. Maddox took a step toward him, and Rooster, Axel, and a few more bikers who had rolled in quietly behind them shifted forward in a tight, protective wall. The tension went from thick to electric in one heartbeat. Evelyn looked out from the cruiser, her voice cracking. Please, stop. I don't want anyone getting hurt. Bear didn't take his eyes off Maddox. Nobody's touching anybody, ma'am. We're just making sure they don't drag you off like a stray dog. Maddox pointed a finger at Axel. All of you are interfering with the police detainment. Rooster laughed. No, what we're doing is making sure you don't violate the Constitution in front of 50 witnesses. Naomi stepped between them, fearless. Open the door and let her out. I can't, he growled. She's being detained until identity verification. That's done, Ryan blurted. Her account is valid. She's a long-term customer. There is no fraud. Maddox stared at him. What?
Ryan took a shaky breath. Her ID matches her account. The withdrawal request is legitimate. I already confirmed it. The manager told me not to say anything. Frank's face drained of color. Keller! Naomi's voice rose, clear and sharp. So she's being arrested for what? Making a bank withdrawal while black? A collective gasp rolled through the parking lot. Even Maddox flinched. Evelyn felt tears spill over. Not from fear this time, but from hearing somebody say the thing she'd kept swallowed her whole life. Bear crossed his arms. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to open that door. You're going to uncuff her, and you're going to do it gently. Maddox's hand hovered near his taser. Don't push me. Rooster slowly stepped forward. Nobody's pushing you. We're telling you the only way this ends without your badge hanging on a hook by sundown. Maddox looked around. Phones, witnesses, political connections, the Hells Angels, and the sinking realization that he had picked the absolute worst target in the parking lot. He exhaled sharply. Fine. The cruiser door clicked open. Evelyn blinked, sunlight hitting her eyes as Maddox freed her wrists. She winced as the metal came off. Naomi wrapped her arms around her immediately, shaking with relief. I've got you, Grandma. I'm right here. The crowd applauded. Someone shouted, Shame on you, officer! Another yelled, That's someone's grandmother! The Hells Angels didn't cheer. They simply watched, arms crossed, guarding her like a pack of wolves that had just chased off a predator. Maddox stepped back, humiliated. Are you satisfied? No. Not even close, Naomi said, voice cold. Bear nodded to her, approving. Good girl. Frank cleared his throat, desperate to salvage something. Mrs. Bird, let's go inside. We'll take care of your withdrawal immediately and offer... Rooster cut him off. She's not stepping foot back in that bank. Evelyn straightened slowly, dignity returning like breath. No, she agreed. I won't. Not after this. Naomi squeezed her hand. Grandma, we're taking this all the way. A new resolve settled in Evelyn's bones. She wasn't just a frightened old woman anymore. She had witnesses, she had family, she had a biker club at her back for reasons she didn't yet understand, and she had a story that was no longer going to be swallowed. It was going to be heard, and the people who had humiliated her had only just begun to face the consequences.
The parking lot of Stonebrook Federal Bank emptied slowly, like a battlefield after the smoke clears. Customers whispered in clusters, glancing over their shoulders at the cruiser, the officers, and the small, trembling woman now surrounded by leather, denim, and unwavering loyalty. Evelyn Bird stood beside Naomi, rubbing her sore wrists. The sting wasn't from the metal anymore. It was from the humiliation, pressed deep like a bruise of the spirit. "Grandma," Naomi whispered, "are you sure you're okay?" Evelyn forced a tiny smile. "I've been through worse, sweetheart, but I'll admit, that one hurt." Bear stepped closer, softer this time. "Mrs. Bird, we'll get you home safely." His voice, deep enough to rattle windows, was suddenly gentle, protective, respectful. Evelyn wasn't used to men like him speaking to her that way. Not in this world. Naomi held her arm. "We'll go home. Get you comfortable. I'm staying with you tonight." Evelyn nodded, though her eyes were still unfocused, drifting back toward the bank doors where everything had gone wrong, where she had been treated like a criminal for daring to save money for her granddaughter. The Hells Angels moved as a pack, surrounding her just enough to shield, not enough to intimidate. People recorded from the sidewalk, even now, even after the apology that felt more like a formality than remorse. Maddox stayed by his cruiser, jaw locked, arms crossed. He looked like a man standing in the wreckage of his own choices. His supervisor had already arrived and taken him aside, speaking in a tone low and dangerous. Maddox kept glancing back, at Evelyn, at the cameras, at the dozens of eyes judging him in real time. This was not going away. Naomi helped Evelyn into her car,
But before she closed the door, Bear leaned down. "Ma'am, if it's all right with you, we're going to follow you home." Evelyn blinked. "Follow me? Whatever for?" Bear straightened. "Because what happened today doesn't end today." Rooster added, "That bank's already on the defensive. The cops are scrambling. We don't want anybody trying to fix their mistake by bothering you later." Naomi exhaled. "That actually makes sense." Evelyn gave a small nod. "All right." Bear tapped the roof of the car lightly, like a salute, then stepped back. The engines fired up behind them, roaring to life in perfectly timed unison. Evelyn had never felt safer than she did in that moment, with the thunder of a dozen bikes forming a shield around her sedan. They drove home that way, Evelyn in front, Hell's Angels behind, franking, watching. And the whole neighborhood came to their windows, because scenes like that didn't happen in quiet suburbs, not unless something very wrong had happened. By the time Naomi helped Evelyn inside the small, cozy house she'd lived in for 42 years, the adrenaline had started wearing off. Evelyn's knees buckled slightly. Naomi caught her, guiding her carefully to the worn floral couch. "Just sit. I'll get you some water." But when Naomi returned, Evelyn wasn't sitting. She was pacing. Slow, uneven, clutching her arms like she was holding herself together. "Grandma," Naomi said gently. Evelyn stopped in front of the window, staring out at the row of motorcycles lining her curb. "I thought," she swallowed hard, "I thought those days were behind us." Naomi set the water down. "What days?" "The ones where people look at you and see something dangerous instead of human." Naomi's chest tightened. "Grandma, it wasn't your fault." "Oh, I know that," Evelyn sighed. "But try telling that to the world." Naomi wrapped an arm around her. "We will tell them. You're not letting this go. Not this time." Evelyn looked at her, surprised. "You think I should?" "I think you have to," Naomi said, "for every person who can't fight back." Evelyn swallowed, nodding slowly. But then, a knock thundered through the door. Naomi jumped. "Who?" Bear's voice rumbled from outside. "It's us." Naomi opened the door. Bear, Rooster, and Axel stood on the porch, 3 walls of muscle barely fitting into the frame. Behind them, several more bikers lingered in the yard, arms crossed, scanning the street. "Ma'am," Bear said respectfully as ever, "we need to talk to you about what happened." Evelyn blinked. "Come in then." The house suddenly felt smaller with 3 men of that size inside it. Bear removed his gloves. "We did some digging while you drove. One of our brothers is a legal consultant, knows how these things go." Naomi raised her brows. "A legal consultant? In your club?" Rooster smirked. "What, you think we're all mechanics? We've got paramedics, business owners, a guy with 2 PhDs. We contain multitudes." Axel chuckled. "Don't tell people that. We'll lose the intimidation factor." Bear leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "The point is, this isn't the first time Stonebrook Federal's been caught profiling. They've been sued twice in the last decade, settled both quietly." Evelyn's head snapped up. "Twice?" Bear nodded. "And Officer Maddox? He's got a history. 3 complaints, none upheld, of course, but they're there." Naomi clenched her fists. They thought she'd be an easy target, an elderly woman alone. Evelyn's voice trembled. "They wouldn't have done that to one of the white ladies in the line." "No," Bear agreed bluntly, "they wouldn't have." There was no sugarcoating it. Naomi took a breath. "So now what? What happens next?" Bear exchanged a look with Rooster before answering. "That depends on you." "On me?" Evelyn blinked. "What choice do I have?" "The choice," Bear said, "is whether you want this to be public or private. If you want to let it go or make damn sure it never happens again." Evelyn hesitated. She wasn't a fighter, not by nature. She had spent her whole life staying quiet, staying polite, staying gracious, because that's what her generation was taught to survive. But today had felt like a crack in her soul, a deep one.
She sat back on the couch, rubbing her wrists again. What would happen if it went public? Rooster stepped in. The video's already circulating online. All we'd have to do is confirm it. Press, civil rights groups, lawyers, cops will scramble, bank will scramble harder. Naomi set her jaw. Do it. Grandma, we should do it. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Bear. Why? She asked quietly. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. Bear softened in a way she didn't expect. My mother was treated the same way when I was a kid. Wrong bank, wrong neighborhood, wrong color. He paused. Nobody stood up for her. He leaned back. So we're standing up for you. Evelyn's eyes shined, and for the first time since the bank, the fear inside her shifted into something steadier, heavier, stronger. Resolve. I want justice, she said finally, however far it goes. Naomi exhaled a breath she'd been holding for hours. Then we're doing this. Rooster grinned. Good, because the internet already has opinions. He turned his phone around. The video, posted only 47 minutes earlier, already had 2.3 million views. Evelyn gasped. Naomi covered her mouth. Bear's smile was grim. World's watching, Mrs. Bird, and they're on your side. Evelyn sucked in a shaky breath. For the first time in a long time, she felt powerful. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she finally had a voice. And this time, the world was ready to listen.
Night fell over Evelyn Bird's quiet neighborhood, but sleep didn't come with it. Not for her. Not for Naomi. Not for the dozen bikers stationed outside in silent, unmoving vigilance. The glow of streetlights bounced off chrome engines and black helmets as the Hells Angels stood guard like an unofficial army. An army that didn't clock out, didn't blink, didn't scare easily. Inside, Evelyn sat on the couch with her hands folded in her lap, watching the video that had now exploded across the internet. 8 million views. Then 12. Then 20. Her face, lined with age, dignity, and fear, filled every screen. Officer Maddox's rough grip, the way he jerked her arm, Ryan's panicked expression, the manager watching quietly from behind glass, all of it spilled through the world like wildfire. The comments section was a war zone of outrage. This woman could be my grandmother. Why are banks still doing this? The cops should be fired on the spot. Respect to those bikers for stepping in. Evelyn didn't know whether to cry or hide. Naomi refreshed the page every few minutes, her anger simmering hotter each time the numbers jumped. They're sending it to news channels, she muttered. Grandma, this is everywhere. Evelyn swallowed. I never wanted attention like this. Naomi softened. You didn't cause it. They did. You reacted with grace like you always do. Evelyn looked down at her frail hands. Grace only gets you so far. A knock sounded at the door, sharp, rapid, urgent. Naomi tensed. Bear's voice rumbled from outside. It's just me. Naomi opened the door. Bear stepped in, followed by Rooster and a man Evelyn hadn't met before. A tall, broad-shouldered figure with salt and pepper hair, a trimmed beard, and a patch on his vest reading Judge. He closed the door behind him. Evening, ma'am, he said, giving Evelyn a respectful nod. I'm Mark. They call me Judge. I handle clubhouse logistics. Naomi arched her brow. That sounds like a fancy way of saying something dangerous. Judge smiled faintly. You're not wrong. Bear sat on the armchair across from Evelyn. There's something you need to know. Evelyn braced herself. Is it bad? Rooster exhaled. Depends on how you look at it. Naomi's voice tightened. Tell us. Bear leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The police department held a meeting an hour ago. Maddox,
was placed on temporary leave. Temporary? Naomi snapped. After what he did? Temporary is step one, Judge said. Internal Affairs will dig deeper now that the whole country's watching. They can't sweep this one, not with this many eyes. Evelyn lowered her gaze. He didn't even apologize. That man's not sorry, he's scared. Naomi crossed her arms. Good, he should be. Judge cleared his throat. But that's not all. He pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward them. And news anchor's face appeared. In breaking news, Stonebrook Federal Bank released a statement regarding the viral video. Naomi leaned closer. Oh, here we go. The anchor continued. The bank claims they acted out of routine fraud prevention protocol after concerns were raised about an unusual withdrawal request by an elderly customer whose behavior appeared confused. Naomi shot to her feet. Confused? She was looking for her wallet. Judge sighed. They're trying to spin it, make it look like they were protecting her. Bear's jaw tightened. Cowards. Evelyn blinked as the screen replayed her shaking hands, searching through her purse. So now I'm confused, she whispered, hurt blooming across her face like a wound. Naomi knelt beside her. Grandma, don't you dare take this personally. They're lying to save themselves. Judge nodded. They're trying to soften their legal exposure. If they convince the public you were disoriented, they can justify the call to cops. And justify the arrest, Rooster added darkly. Or try to. Evelyn looked heartbroken. They're making me look like I don't know my own name. Bear leaned forward. Ma'am, listen to me. His voice dropped to a gentle rumble. The world saw what really happened. Don't let their PR lie take your peace. Naomi reached for Evelyn's hand. We're fighting back. We have the truth. There was another knock at the door. 3 quick taps. Naomi stiffened. Who now? Bear peered through the peephole. It's news crews. 3 vans and more rolling up. Naomi groaned. You've got to be kidding me. Judge frowned. We figured this might happen. That's why I wanted to talk before they surrounded the place. Evelyn's breath trembled. I can't talk to reporters. I don't want to be the face of anything. Judge softened. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But they're not leaving, Naomi said bitterly. This is going to be a circus. Bear stood. We'll handle the press. Evelyn blinked. You? How? Rooster smirked. We intimidate people for a hobby. Bear shot him a look. Professionally, we discourage crowding. Judge adjusted his vest. We'll make a perimeter. Nobody gets near your door. The roar of engines outside confirmed it. They were already forming a wall between Evelyn's porch and the hungry reporters gathering on the sidewalk. Evelyn watched the bikes line up, engines thundering louder than the news van's generators. The reporters tried to push closer, microphones held like weapons, until Bear stepped forward with all 6'5" of his presence and that quiet, cold stare that could stop a full-grown man mid-step. They stopped. Every single one. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. I've never had anyone fight for me like this, she whispered. Naomi put an arm around her shoulders. You deserve it. Inside the house, Judge sat again. Evelyn, there's something else we need to prepare you for. She blinked. What more could there be? Retaliation, Judge said simply. Maddox won't take this lying down. His buddies won't either. They'll claim you overreacted or caused trouble, maybe dig through your past, try to find something to discredit you. Naomi scowled. She's a grandmother who volunteers at church and feeds stray cats. What could they possibly dig up? Judge shrugged. Doesn't matter. When people get scared of losing their badge, their pension, their reputation, they'll try anything. Evelyn trembled slightly. I don't want trouble. Bear shook his head. Trouble already came to your doorstep. We're making sure it doesn't get inside. Evelyn closed her eyes for a beat, her breath trembling on the exhale. When she opened them, something had changed. She no longer looked afraid. She looked determined. All right, if they want to fight. She straightened her back. I'm not backing down. Naomi smiled, proud. That's my grandma. Outside, reporters shouted questions into the wind, cameras flashing against a line of leather jackets that refused to move an inch. The world wanted answers. But before answers could come, there would be consequences. Because every injustice has a backlash. And the storm was only just beginning. The morning after the news vans arrived, Evelyn Street looked less like a quiet suburban block and more like the front line of a cultural battlefield. Reporters clustered on sidewalks. Tripods sprouted like metal weeds. Neighbors watched from their windows, some fascinated, others nervously peeking from behind blinds. The steady hum of idling vans mixed with the low, rhythmic rumble of Harley engines, forming a barrier between Evelyn's home and the chaos outside. People online had given it a name already: the grandmother standoff. It sounded dramatic, but no one inside the house felt anything close to heroic. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, trying to steady her hands long enough to butter a piece of toast. Her fingers trembled anyway. Naomi watched from the stove, stirring eggs that neither of them would feel like eating. You don't have to talk today, Naomi said softly. We can just keep ignoring them. Evelyn sighed. Ignoring isn't working. They're multiplying. Naomi peeked out the window. Another truck had arrived, this one with a satellite dish. Fantastic. They're bringing space technology now. Before either could continue complaining, the front door opened, followed by the distinctive thud of heavy boots. Rooster entered first, scanning the room out of habit. Bear walked in behind him, ducking slightly through the doorway, followed by Judge, who held a battered laptop against his chest. You holding up okay, ma'am? Bear asked. As well as I can, Evelyn replied. Rooster grabbed a mug from the cabinet. He'd made himself at home without ever asking permission. You want us to chase him off today? He asked Naomi. Naomi raised her brow. With what? Glare them into oblivion? Rooster shrugged. We've scared off worse. Judge cleared his throat. Before we decide anything, you need to see this. He opened the laptop and placed it on the table so everyone could see. A news anchor appeared on screen. Gray suit, practiced expression, the kind of voice that sounded like it had been trained in a vacuum. New details are emerging this morning about Evelyn Byrd, the woman at the center of the Stonebrook Federal incident. Evelyn's face drained of color. Oh no, she whispered. Naomi stepped behind her, instinctively resting a hand on her shoulders. The anchor continued. According to sources within the department, officers described Miss Byrd as agitated and uncooperative, claiming she raised her voice, refused instructions, and caused a disturbance inside the bank. Naomi scoffed. Lies, bold-faced lies. But Judge kept a sober expression. There's more. The report continued. Police representatives also say the officer involved, Daniel Maddox, has received death threats overnight from unknown individuals, causing concern for his safety. Rooster snorted. What, death threats? What, someone said mean things in a comment section? Bear frowned. He's trying to flip the narrative, make himself the victim. The anchor wrapped up the segment with a dramatic flourish. The situation is still developing, but communities are already asking whether viral outrage is putting law enforcement officers at risk. Naomi slammed her fist against the counter.
Turning this on Grandma? On us? They want people to forget what happened. Evelyn's shoulders sunk. They're painting me as trouble? Judge closed the laptop carefully. This is standard crisis management. Stonebrook PD is pushing back because they're catching heat. Rooster threw his hands up. Yeah, because they deserve it. And the bank? Evelyn asked quietly. Judge exchanged a look with Bear. They released a new statement. It's worse. Bear pulled out his phone, scrolled, then read aloud. We deeply regret the distress caused to Miss Bird. However, our employees followed appropriate protocol in response to unusual customer behavior and potential safety concerns. We have launched a review to ensure our procedures remain aligned with best practices. Unusual behavior, whispered Evelyn. They're calling her unstable, like she's some senile old woman hallucinating her own money, snapped Naomi. They're covering themselves, Bear said. If they admit they were wrong, they open themselves to a lawsuit. I don't want a lawsuit, Evelyn said, distressed. That doesn't matter, replied Judge. They're acting like you already filed one. Before Evelyn could respond, someone burst through the door. A breathless, slightly sweaty young man wearing a wrinkled button-up and holding a wired microphone. Hi, are you... He didn't finish the sentence because Rooster grabbed him by the collar and spun him right back out the door. Press got in the yard, muttered Rooster, wiping his hands like he'd touched something sticky. Bear muttered something that sounded like a promise of violence. Naomi pinched her brow. This is getting ridiculous. They're breaching the perimeter now? Judge's tone darkened. If reporters can slip in, others can too. Evelyn looked terrified. You mean police? Bear didn't sugarcoat it. If Maddox or his buddies want payback, they might try intimidation, maybe lean on you, maybe Naomi. Naomi's jaw set. Let them try. Evelyn grabbed her granddaughter's hand. No, I don't want anyone hurt because of me. Bear moved closer, crouching so he could look her in the eyes. Ma'am, you didn't ask for this storm. They brought it to you. What you're facing now isn't because you did something wrong. It's because you stood up against something wrong. She blinked, surprised by the conviction in his voice. Judge straightened, clasping his hands behind his back. It's time to talk strategy. Evelyn frowned. Strategy? That sounds like war talk. Rooster grinned. Lady, look outside. The growl of engines, the standoff with cameras, the tension vibrating through the street. It already was one. Judge continued. The department is trying to get control of the story. They want to paint you as unreliable, confused, or difficult. Maddox's union will back him. The city's lawyers will back the bank. They'll all try to discredit you because they know public opinion is on your side, for now. What can we do? Evelyn asked. You tell your side, Bear said, on your terms, not theirs. Naomi snapped her fingers. Yes, a video, a statement, something that can't be edited or twisted. Judge nodded. Exactly, before they cement a false narrative. Evelyn looked down, twisting her fingers. But I'm not good at speeches. You don't need to be, Naomi said gently. Just be honest. Be you. And we'll make sure it gets out unfiltered, Bear added. We've got connections. Rooster coughed, meaning bikers with too much time and too many social media accounts. Bear rolled his eyes. It works. The idea hung in the air for a moment, settling slowly. Evelyn finally nodded. All right, I'll do it. Naomi gave her shoulders a supportive squeeze. Good. We'll record it in the living room. Judge held up a hand. One more thing. The second you speak publicly, the retaliation will escalate. Evelyn swallowed. Escalate how? Bear didn't hesitate. They might dig into your medical history, try to frame you as mentally compromised, look into your past finances, question Naomi's involvement, maybe even run background checks on us. Rooster threw his hands up. Great! I'm doomed! Judge ignored him. They'll get desperate. Then we let them, Evelyn said quietly. Everyone turned. She straightened her posture, shoulders back, chin lifted, her expression no longer frightened, but firm, resolute. They lied about me, she said. They tried to bully me. They treated me like a criminal for wanting my own money, and now they're trying to paint me as a confused old woman who caused trouble in a bank? She exhaled, slow and steady. No. If I don't speak up, how many more people will they do this to? Naomi moved in front of her, eyes shining with pride. Then we do this, together. Judge nodded. Then let the unraveling begin. As they set up the camera, Bear stepped outside to reinforce the perimeter. The reporters surged closer when they saw equipment. The bikers tightened formation. Engines roared. Microphones waved like flags. The air vibrated with tension. Inside the house, Evelyn sat beneath a soft lamp glow, hands folded, heart thudding. She cleared her throat, looked into the camera, and began to speak. The moment she did, the unraveling truly started, not of her reputation, but of the lies built against her. And for the first time since that awful day at the bank, she wasn't afraid. She was ready.
The video went live at exactly 7:03 p.m. Judge hit post with a single tap, and within 3 minutes it had already passed 50,000 views. By 10 minutes, it was breaking 100,000. By the time the sun dipped behind the palm trees outside Evelyn's living room window, the entire country was watching the trembling, dignified woman sitting on a floral couch in a little house guarded by leather-clad giants. But while the world watched Evelyn's face on their screens, Evelyn herself stood in her kitchen, hands braced against the counter, heart pounding like it wanted out of her chest. Is it doing well?" she asked Naomi, voice barely above a whisper. Naomi held her phone so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "Grandma, you're trending worldwide." Rooster poked his head into the kitchen. "And the comments? Holy hell, I didn't even know people could be this mad and this supportive at the same time." Bear entered behind him, face grim. "Our phones are blowing up too, and not all of it's good." Evelyn straightened. "Bad?" Judge appeared last, closing the front door behind him. His tone was calm, controlled, too controlled. "Stonebrook PD just released a new statement," he said. Naomi scoffed. "Let me guess, more lies?" Judge shook his head. "No, not lies. Something else." He placed his laptop on the counter and clicked play. A stern-faced police chief appeared on screen, standing stiffly at a podium with the department's seal behind him. Cameras flashed around him like paparazzi. "We are aware of the video released by Miss Evelyn Byrd," the chief said, voice clipped and careful. "Let me be perfectly clear. Officer Maddox's actions that day do not represent the standards of the Stonebrook Police Department. Effective immediately, Officer Maddox has been placed on administrative suspension pending the results of an internal investigation." Evelyn's mouth dropped open. Naomi blinked hard. "Suspension? They're trying to calm things down." Judge continued watching, expression unreadable. The chief's next sentence changed the temperature in the room. "Furthermore, the department is cooperating with the district attorney's office to determine whether criminal charges are warranted." Even Bear, who rarely showed surprise, raised his eyebrows. Rooster whistled. "Well, damn! They're throwing him under the bus." Judge paused the video. "No, they're protecting themselves. This is damage control." Evelyn's voice was small. "But they're investigating him." Judge sighed. "Only because they had no choice. Your video forced their hand." "And now," Bear added, "Maddox knows exactly who to blame for his suspension." The kitchen grew very quiet. Rooster stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We have to be careful now. He's the kind of man who lashes out when cornered." Naomi bristled. "And he won't get anywhere near my grandma." Evelyn, however, touched her granddaughter's arm softly. "Sweetheart, don't speak too boldly. We don't know what he might do." But Naomi shook her head fiercely. "I'm not scared of him." "Good. But be smart too. Fear and recklessness look the same in a man like Maddox's eyes. Before more could be said, a new sound echoed through the neighborhood. A sound that made all chatter stop cold. Police sirens. A whole caravan of them. They grew louder, closer, until blue and red lights flared across the curtains. Bear and Rooster immediately moved to the front window. Judge's jaw tightened. Naomi looked at her grandmother. "Stay behind me." Evelyn squeezed her hand. "I'm fine." Outside, multiple police units screeched to a halt. Reporters swarmed toward them instantly. Neighbors pressed to their windows. The Hells Angels tightened their wall in front of the house like a phalanx of modern-day warriors. Then a final vehicle rolled up, a black, unmarked sedan. The door opened, and out stepped Officer Daniel Maddox. His eyes scanned the property, jaw locked, expression twisted with barely controlled fury. Gone was the smug, dismissive grin from the bank. This Maddox was dangerous. Corners sharpened, ego wounded, dignity bruised. Bear cursed under his breath. We figured he might act out, didn't expect him to show up with backup. Judge's voice was low. He's trying to intimidate her, make a scene, push us into doing something he can use against us. Rooster cracked his knuckles. I'm not opposed. Evelyn took a small step forward. Don't go out there looking for a fight. Judge opened a window just enough to hear the shouting outside. Reporters pressed microphones out like weapons. A female reporter shouted, "Officer Maddox, do you have a comment on your suspension?" Another shouted, "Are you here to confront Ms. Bird?" Maddox ignored them all. His eyes were locked on the front door of Evelyn's house. He marched right up to the Hells Angels wall. Big men in leather, arms folded, immovable. He was a single, furious man dwarfed by giants, but he didn't care. "Move!" Maddox barked. "Not happening." "I said move!" Rooster smirked. "Go home, badge boy." The crowd gasped. Maddox chest-checked Rooster, a deliberate push. Reporter cameras exploded in flashes. Judge hissed from inside, "He wants you to swing, don't do it." Rooster remained a statue. Maddox sneered. "Thought so." He turned his attention back to the house. "Evelyn Bird, you come out here right now!" Evelyn flinched. Naomi wrapped her arm around her. Bear's face darkened. He's losing it. The police officers behind Maddox looked uncomfortable. They hadn't signed up to escort a tantrum. Some exchanged looks. One shifted his weight like he might step in. Then came the moment everything snapped. Maddox stormed forward again, fists clenched, and this time he tried to push past the bikers. Bear caught him mid-shove, grabbing his forearm with an iron grip. "You need to back up, officer." Cameras went wild, reporters screamed questions, and for a fraction of a second Maddox seemed ready to punch him. But a voice cut through the chaos before he could move. A small, trembling, steady voice. "Officer Maddox." The crowd parted. The Angels turned, and Evelyn Bird stepped out onto her porch. She had changed out of her house clothes into a simple blue sweater, hair pinned neatly. She stood with her cane in one hand and Naomi at her side. Maddox's face faltered. "You—" Evelyn raised her hand. "Let me speak." The entire street went silent. Camera lights glowed like stars. "I am not afraid of you," she said quietly. "Not anymore." Maddox's face twisted. "You ruined my life." Evelyn Haddad shook her head. "You ruined it yourself when you chose cruelty, when you chose to treat me like less than human." Naomi added, voice sharp and clear, "And you're not going to bully her anymore." Maddox pointed at her. "You think a video makes you saints? That those criminals," he gestured at the Hells Angels, "make you safe?" Bear stepped forward. "Safer than you ever made her." Maddox snapped, "Shut your mouth." Evelyn lifted her chin. "Officer Maddox, I hope you get the help you need. I truly do. But you are not welcome here. Not today, not ever again." Her voice broke slightly. But her resolve did not. "And if you truly believe I wanted to destroy your life, you should remember, all I asked for was my own money. You chose everything that came after." Reporters murmured. A few police officers lowered their eyes. Even Maddox faltered, just a bit. Then he turned sharply, pushing past his own officers, storming back towards his car. "This isn't over," he spat. But Bear called after him. "Actually, It is. Because at that exact moment, an unmarked SUV rolled up. The DA stepped out. 2 investigators followed, walking straight past Maddox without acknowledgement. "Officer Daniel Maddox?" One asked. "You're under investigation for misconduct, false reporting, and violation of civil rights." The street erupted. Maddox sputtered, "You can't!" But they could. They escorted him away. Not in cuffs. Not yet. But with hands hovering close to his elbows. A silent message. "You're done." The cameras followed him, drowning him in the same attention he once wielded like a weapon. Evelyn felt her knees buckle. Naomi caught her. Bear placed a steady hand on her back. Rooster grinned at the spectacle. Judge exhaled long and slow. And as Maddox's car disappeared down the street, the roar of engines around Evelyn rose in unison, a protective salute from the men who had stood between her and the worst of the storm. Evelyn Byrd, the elderly woman who had just wanted to withdraw her savings, had now become the center of a reckoning far bigger than she ever asked for. The cameras turned back to her, hungry for a final statement. But she didn't speak. She simply rested her hand on Naomi's shoulder, took a deep breath, and said only, "Let's go home."
And for the first time in days, she felt safe. She wasn't alone. Not anymore.